Hi, everyone. We'll just give it a few minutes for people to join and then we'll get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. On behalf of the Environmental Finance Center Network, welcome to session 4 in our Getting Grant Ready webinar series for tribes. Today's session is on strengthening proposals with the right data. My name is Owen Volk from the Syracuse University Environmental Finance Center. Before we begin, we're going to go over a few logistics and then we can get started. During the webinar today, everyone will be kept on mute to ensure audio quality. If you have a question, please type it into the GoToWebinar question dialog box anytime throughout the session. We will be saving your questions for a facilitated Q&A session at the end of the presentation. After the webinar, you will receive a follow-up email that includes a link to the recording and other information that you may need. You can also download the slides from today in the Handouts tab in your GoToWebinar control panel. This webinar has not been submitted for pre-approval of continuing education credits, but eligible attendees will receive a certificate of attendance for their personal record. To receive a certificate for this session, you must attend for the entire session and register and attend individually using your real name and unique email address. Certificates will be sent via email within 30 days of the webinar date. If you have questions or need assistance, please contact smallsystems@syr.edu. Now, for a little bit about us. The Environmental Finance Center Network provides training and technical assistance to small water and wastewater systems in all U.S. states and territories through our building technical, managerial, and finance capacity programs. If your community or utility needs assistance with drinking or wastewater system management, please feel free to contact us through our request form, which I will be sharing shortly in the chat. Finally, I just wanted to announce this is going to be the next webinar in our series. I will be sending a link shortly in the chat that you can register at. And on that note, we can get started. I would like to introduce our presenter for today, Cynthia Naha, Senior Associate at the Capacity Collaborative and Senior Tribal Climate Resilience Liaison with the American Indian Higher Education Consortium and the Southwest Climate Adaptation Science Center. Welcome, Cynthia. I will go ahead and hand it over to you. We are unable to hear you. One moment.
Thank you, Owen. I do appreciate that. And good afternoon, everybody. And thank you again for attending session 4 of this 6-part series. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we will get underway. Okay, Owen, can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to go ahead and hide my camera. So as we move forward through this presentation, I'm definitely looking forward to the opportunity to hear any questions that you might have. And also at the end of the webinar, I will be sharing my email for the Capacity Collaborative. So if you have questions aside from anything that you might not have put into the chat today, you can always reach out to me. So thank you again, Owen, for that introduction. As he mentioned, I am Cynthia Naha. I'm an enrolled member of the Hopi tribe. I'm also Tewa and from the Ihangtawan Dakota Oyate. I reside here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I have 20 years of 20 years experience working in tribal government and environmental and natural resources management. I've worked for tribes in California, Arizona, and now New Mexico. And as Owen mentioned, I do also work for the American Indian Higher Education Consortium and the Southwest Climate Adaptation Science Center as their senior tribal climate resilience liaison. So if you should have any questions, especially if you're in the Southwest region, definitely feel free to reach out to me if you are looking further into climate adaptation. So as we get started, okay, there you go. There is a lot of information that we will go over today. And if you attended the previous 3 sessions, you'll be somewhat familiar with the content and information that will be shared today. So if you do have questions, please be sure to add them to the Q&A dialog box here in GoToWebinar. And for the purpose of, this presentation, as well as like the last presentation, I did use my experience in solid waste management and building solid waste programs for tribes as an example for, a lot of the grant work that I've done. And I'll be doing that again today, is just kind of going through what I've done in regards to building solid waste and recycling programs for tribes and utilizing the information and data that is necessary to really build and strengthen my proposal, which most of the ones, as I shared in the previous sessions, were from the US EPA, because we did look at the request for applications for US EPA's SWIFR grant, which is the Solid Waste Infrastructure and Recycling program. So let's go ahead and get started. So again, finding the data. As you begin to build your proposal, we looked in previous webinars, we looked at, identifying funding needs and finding the opportunities that'll best fit your program needs, your tribal needs, your community needs, your organization or your entity. So really, it's important to understand that as we move through this 6-part series, it all, so to speak, rolls right into one another because of the fact that the information that is being shared is necessary for you as the grant writer or you as the staff person that is developing a proposal to submit to whatever federal funding source you are looking at in hopes of getting that award, so you can definitely implement different types of opportunities for your community as well as build that capacity. And again, as we're looking at identifying data, it's also important to understand what it is that's necessarily needed in whether it's a request for application or a notice of funding opportunity. It's really important, again, as I mentioned previously, to read through the full NOFO or the full RFA, so that way you understand the types of data that is needed to help strengthen your proposal. So again, you need to justify your project with data. So again, looking at how is the community impacted by no recycling, what are the local environmental impacts of illegal dump sites, and how will these projects impact these issues, and how will the community benefit. So those are really key things to kind of consider as you are developing your project proposal, because when we go through this presentation, and I believe the last one, we talked about the logic model and understanding what outcomes and outputs were and why it's necessary to ensure that as you're developing or identifying not just the needs for the type of proposal you're going to submit for your community, but also understanding what type of activities you're looking for, what type of resources do you need to really develop a strong proposal, but not only that, but to continue to build capacity for your program, for your tribe, for your small systems. So again, it's really important to understand how to utilize data to justify your project in your proposal. Again, looking at this is how is the community impacted by no recycling. So what are the things, I've done in previous grant opportunities that I had from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, as particularly or specifically the General Assistance Program grants for tribes, is looking at, if we're going to develop a recycling program, well, what type of data is necessary for me to know to begin to develop opportunities for recycling for the community. So what you see here in the background is a waste stream characterization. And of course, waste stream characterizations are never the funnest thing to do, because you do have to sort through trash, you do have to pull out recyclable materials, you do have to pull out those items that you are looking for to build your recycling program, and most importantly, to identify and generate that data as far as the quantity of recyclable materials that you are pulling out of the waste stream to really help build your recycling program. And again, same thing for looking at illegal dump sites. You know, if we're going to write a proposal and we're going to submit it for, say, an illegal dump site project cleanup, then we need to, as staff, really identify how many dump sites do we have, what type of refuse are we finding in these dump sites, and what do we really need to know, one, not only to protect ourselves when we're going out there to dig through these dump sites to identify the waste stream and the characteristics of it, but also ensuring that we ourselves are protecting ourselves properly with PPE. So again, based off, you know, what you find and identify within an illegal dump site is going to give you the data that is necessary for you to put into your project proposal on why, not one, why you want to do the dump site cleanups, two, perhaps there's some hazards in there like household hazardous waste, or even like sharps, because we have seen sharps in illegal dump sites. So ensuring that you're building a program that is specific to the needs, or your data, your proposal is specific to your needs based off of the project information you found while you are out on the land looking at these illegal dump sites. And again, how will this project impact the community, and not just the community, but again, the environment, because you are going through and looking at ways to clean up these dump sites, or looking at ways to increase or improve or build the capacity to develop a recycling program, so that way you, maybe your cost for the transfer station as far as those tipping fees, maybe that cost is exceeding what you have in your budget, but you're, so by developing your recycling program and knowing based off of the amount of pounds or tonnage that you could be pulling out of the waste stream, that's going to give you the information necessary for you to perhaps be able to decrease, you know, to reach that limit of the available funding you have to run your program, or you have available to cover these tipping fees. So again, I think community impact is really important, because again, identifying ways to not just clean up your reservation, clean up your small rural town, clean up your community, it's really looking at what are the benefits of this project, how is it going to improve current conditions out there on the land, especially if, say, these dump sites are near, whether it's a ephemeral stream, or whether it's near a river, or where it's near perhaps somewhere where it's creating more harm than good, especially if there's items in that dump site that is causing increased pollution within those rivers, within that ephemeral stream, especially once we get rain events and the rain events come down and we're seeing the impact of what is being accumulated as the water runs through these dump sites. So again, really looking at the overall benefit of how the data and information you are collecting is going to strengthen your proposal. But not only that, but it's also going to help you as you continue to identify what type of funding needs, or what type of funding needs your tribe or your community needs, or your small systems, and the right opportunities that are going to go with it. So that's always important. And the same thing for your logic model. If you're looking at what your long-term outcome is going to be, and perhaps that's having your community be more conscious about where they are taking their refuse to, and that they're following, you know, so to speak, the protocol that has been developed within your tribe, within your community, for maybe a transfer station, or maybe if it's a landfill, you know, ensuring that, you know, they're able to really participate in the efforts that you are developing through these various funding mechanisms that you are applying for. So again, when we look at data and identify what is necessarily needed to strengthen the proposal, it's ensuring that it's verifiable. You want to make sure that any information you put into your project proposal are basically the facts, you know, what you're seeing transpiring within your community, and how to utilize the information and data that's being developed from within to ensure that it's viable, to ensure that it's specific and it's meeting the specific needs of your funding opportunities that you are applying for, and that you're really developing your project proposal with the most accurate data and information that you have available, or that may be readily available to you as the staff person, as the grant writer, because that's going to really go a long way, especially if within that RFA and that NOFO has identified maybe an X amount of number of maybe illegal dump sites you're going to clean up to get your proposal funded, or how much tonnage you're pulling out of your waste stream, to ensure that building a recycling program is something that is needed for your community, and that you are specific to that, your end goal as far as development of that program for your tribe or your small systems or your community. And also knowing that, oftentimes peer reviewed data is very much important, and it's also utilized in many different ways, because again, we want to ensure that whatever information you are providing to the grant funder in your proposal is specific to the needs of what is outlined as far as those allowable costs, as far as the allowable activity. And so being sure that you can identify where and how to obtain this information is crucial to the development of that proposal. So again, looking for data, it can also send you down the rabbit hole. Again, this is what I feel, and in my experience, it's very important to ensure that you are following what that NOFO says, what that RFA says, because if you don't, oftentimes, I know for me, you click on one thing, you can end up being, sent over to this other web page or this website, sent to another location. And then oftentimes, sometimes we begin to overthink, especially if you're like me. I began to overthink my proposal and the project. And then I start or have the tendency to look for additional data that might not apply to the project at hand, or it might not be specific to what is being asked for in that NOFO or RFA. So it's really important to ensure that as a NOFO or RFA is released, that you begin to take the time to identify what the specific data and information you will need for that, and how you are going to obtain it or generate it from within your community, or if you have to reach out to maybe get some numbers from the state, or even looking at larger numbers like US EPA has, I believe it's like 4.5 pounds is what a household will generate as far as solid waste or household refuse is concerned on a daily basis. So really just identify where you need to look for that data and information. But also, again, just be wary of, how much information is too much. I know oftentimes we think, that maybe the more information, the better, maybe the more attachments, the better. But again, making sure that you follow the guidelines within that NOFO or RFA, at what the page limit will be, at what specific amount of attachments you need to include in your proposal. So again, just being mindful of all of that. So again, as you begin to identify what type of data is needed and what the right data is, again, it's not to necessarily say that data is wrong in any sort of way, but again, it's going to be dependent on what it is you're specifically applying for your community, for your tribe, for your entity. So again, keeping in mind that where you look at is really important, and especially if you're developing a proposal from within your tribal community, that perhaps some of the specific data that you need will come from your tribe. It might come from the enrollment office. You might want to talk about talk about the number of households or the number of tribal members that are there within your reservation, especially if new housing comes on board. And I know many of you that are dealing with small systems, when you have a new housing subdivision that's being developed, you also got to think about, well, okay, with this new division coming aboard, are we going to put them on septic systems, or are they going to be tied into the larger system, especially if it's a wastewater treatment facility? Again, looking at perhaps you need some numbers on statistics in regards to maybe the health of your community, whether it's around the impact of these illegal dump sites, or perhaps you're trying to get funding to go from lagoons to an actual, treatment facility for your wastewater. So looking at what could be the potential health impacts is definitely important in the capacity or the way that you are developing your proposal, and again, based off of what federal agency you are applying for. So again, maybe the education department might have some information for you. Maybe it's vital to know that, you know, you're building a new school within your community, and again, determining how you're going to set this system up for the treatment of its wastewater. Maybe you're also wanting to include gray water. And so what would that look like as far as identifying what information is necessary for you to include gray water within a new housing division or within a new school building or even just a building in general, and what type of data is necessarily needed to know how this gray water will be used. What is it going to say serve, as far as like if you're going to have a kind of like in the schoolyard, for example, you know, if you can envision it next to, you know, certain things where you want to grow trees, but then again at the same time you want to make sure that where you're growing your trees is not going to impact the children that are playing in the playground and things of that nature. Again, tribal specific data can come from your environmental natural resources department because of the work that they do and the different types of funding that they might be applying for, you know, because oftentimes, you know, through federal funding, they're always wanting to look at what these tangible results are. What is the benefit of you having this specific grant, and how are you collecting data that's going to show your federal funder that you are reaching your target goals? You are reaching, say, by 2030, 50% of your waste stream is recyclable materials that's going to the recycling facility that's being recycled, or, you know, looking at cardboard and the amount of cardboard that's generated. Perhaps there's a specific number that you're trying to obtain to reach to as far as the goal is concerned for implementing that program within your community, within your tribe, again, within your entity. So it's really important to really understand where to look for data at and how this data is going to be utilized within your project proposal and how it's going to strengthen it for you to get that federal funding and those dollars. Again, think about grants you've applied for, what, based off of your experience, you know, as a grant writer or as a staff member of your tribe, your small systems, and if you have applied for grants, you know, just think about the type of data and information that you utilize to make it successful. I know sometimes when I'm, you know, getting ready to write a grant, you know, oftentimes I don't tend to think of what perhaps maybe I've done previously for maybe a similar grant, whether it was funded or not. But then also going back to those previous proposals to really read through it and identify what information, maybe you didn't have enough data, that's why you didn't get it funded. So you want to try again to apply for another grant opportunity, say the solid waste infrastructure grant, recycling infrastructure grant, and you didn't quite have that information in regards to the tonnage of municipal solid waste that's generated in your community, to really build a solid recycling program that's not only, you know, enabling your community or giving your community an opportunity to to divert that waste stream. So maybe you're helping your utility department by recycling, so that way you can reduce the amount of tonnage and the cost to get rid of that solid waste at the refuge or at the transfer station or at the landfill. So again, really looking at what data and information you had previously to make it successful. And again, if you were awarded, perhaps when you take a look at your previous proposal that was submitted but awarded, that you take another look at that, compare that to the NOFO, compare that to the RFA, and identify what you need to do to further build it up to have the most appropriate data and information to make it successful this next go around. So again, what are the needs of the tribe? So going back to that very first webinar session that we held, and identify what funding opportunities are going to align with your tribe specific needs, and really looking at, you know, the different types of methods for assessing funding priorities and accessing federal funding opportunities or even if it might be a philanthropic opportunity that you're applying for. Again, going back to what those needs are of the tribe, of your small systems, is really going to help you in identifying the right and specific type of data that is needed, and also ensuring again that the data and information that you are going to put into your project proposals not just meets the needs of the tribe, but that it's verifiable. So again, really ensuring that you have the facts, you have tangible information, or even when you develop your goals, as we talked about in developing the logic model for outcomes and outputs, you want to make sure that you are specific to what it is you are hoping to accomplish and achieve with this federal funding, to really not just build programmatic capacity, but to build perhaps staff capacity, to build your tribe's capacity to really manage a wastewater treatment facility, or to manage a recycling program, where you're actually seeing that return of investment happening and going back to your community by them having to participate. So again, looking back at what are the needs of the tribe. So again, as mentioned in the previous webinar and this webinar, because my familiarity is with solid waste, I did show you all the Swiffer RFA. We used that as a guide as I talked about developing the logic model, and as we looked at what we need to know to identify what these long-term, intermediate, and short-term goals are going to be, what we're hoping to achieve. So again, this is just an example. There's many different types of federal funding opportunities available out there, and specifically for your needs. Again, just ensuring that as different NOFOs come out, different RFAs come out, as these announcements are being, posted, making sure that you are following the guidelines, and also, as I mentioned in the previous 3 webinars, making sure that you are well aware of when that submission deadline is, especially if your tribal protocol might require you to have a resolution in order to apply for a grant, and that's just based off of how your tribe really wants it set up for their community, for the way that they like to run their department. So again, it's really important to understand internally what is needed to know on your behalf in order for you to apply for a grant. So again, based off the RFA, again, you will need, if you're looking at, building a recycling program, specific data, is to, your aim is to develop or update plans and focus on encouraging environmentally sound post-consumer materials, or you're trying to strengthen and implement comprehensive data collection efforts to demonstrate that progress towards maybe not just the national recycling goal, but maybe your own goal. So again, as you're looking at your RFA, and these were specifically pulled from the Swiffer grant, is to kind of give you an idea as you're going through these different funding opportunities, depending on how, it's listed. Again, NOFOs and RFAs aren't the only type of funding opportunities that are out there. We talked about with the Indian Tribal Drinking Water Set Aside Grant, and that being a bit more, specific, because of the fact that you also have to ensure that you're working with Indian Health Service in order to really apply for that EPA tribal set aside funding for wastewater and drinking water. So it's really important to, again, understand what the RFA says, what that proposal, or what that NOFO, or the information that is coming out of this specific type of grant is requesting of you as the grant writer. So again, just keeping in mind that based off of what you're applying for, there might be different types of data that they're looking for, and the type of information that you are going to put into this project proposal. So again, I cannot stress that enough. I think as a grant writer, and when I started writing grants, just having the opportunity to really understand what the NOFO is asking for, but again, not just what the NOFO is asking for, because you want to make sure that your data is going to match with what is written in there for allowable activities or allowable costs. And when we talk about costs, the last webinar in this series is going to be developing a budget and budget narrative. And I bring this up because as you develop your budget narrative is very important, because you have to provide the specifics for the amount of money that you're going to get. And of course, we'll talk about that when we get to session 6, which I believe is in 2 weeks from now. But again, that right there, when you put your budget narrative together, shows you, or will show you, how important it is to have that data and information, or those specifics that are needed for you when putting your budget together, because federal agencies want to know how you're going to spend their federal dollars to implement different programs. So again, really looking at the opportunity for understanding the different types of data, or the different types of, again, we'll talk in the next one, milestone metrics and measurements. So really looking at all that is very crucial and important. So as we move forward, ensuring that your project is supported with your data. So again, you want to make sure that you have a well-conceived strategy for your project approach. Looking at your project summary, what information is needed to know specifically to look at how you're going to develop your project summary, and how it's going to support your overall efforts in identifying the specific data that you want to talk about as you introduce your project to the federal funders. Again, you want to be provide a description of specific actions. What are you going to do with these federal dollars? How are you going to not just manage the funding aspect of it, but manage your ability to implement the grant that you applied for and have received, to ensure that you are reaching the goals, not just for your tribe or community, but what EPA or IHS or what USDA, what all of these, or any of these federal organizations might have you do specifically in regards to these funds. Again, methods to be undertaken. What is your approach to the development of your project proposal? What is your approach to implementing the grant once it's received? And again, going back to the logic model and ensuring that you understand the appropriate resources, you understand what those inputs are, you understand how you're going to approach maybe community outreach, and ensuring that you're providing educational opportunities for your community to learn about what you are implementing for that project, and how they can help assist you to reach your goals, and to really show your federal funders that you as the staff person, you as the tribe, you know how to manage these funds, and you manage them appropriately in regards to what you put in your project proposal, your work plan, your scope of work that you said you would do as far as those specific actions are concerned. Because I know from my experience, EPA likes measurable results. And how do you ensure that as you're going through the fiscal year for implementation of your funds, that you are coming out at the end of the fiscal year on 9/30 with measurable results, that you have reached your goal, or you have created progress with specific actions that you put in your work plan, and that you are able to assess and monitor how you are approaching the implementation of this project. So again, that information is very important, because it's going to show your federal funder, as you continue to apply for a specific type of funding, if it's reoccurring, like the General Assistance Program grant through US EPA, then you are showing what those tangible results are. You are also showing not just your federal funder, but also your tribal leadership, your community, that you have the ability to not only just apply for federal funds, but you also have the ability to implement the project, and implement it well, where you're, really providing that data and those specifics and those metrics within your quarterly reports, within your biannual reports, within your annual report, because that really definitely goes a long way, because you as the staff person that's implementing the project are collecting and building your database for the information that you know is necessary to continue to apply for grant funding. So again, updating plans, if you are looking at this, you're going to submit your project proposal to update a plan. You know, you want to make sure that you have the necessary information that you're going to be including in your updating plan, or your update of the plan. Again, maybe before, so this one is specifically on an integrated solid waste management plan, and perhaps it was mostly focused on just household refuse and what we're collecting from the homes because you have a curbside recycling program. But then you, like I mentioned earlier, because we've been using the Swiffer as the RFA for this webinar series, that now you want to add recycling, or now that you know within your maybe your wastewater treatment facility and the plan that they have, especially when it comes to inclusion or the addition of new homes, you know, because again, we're always going to see that influx and or increase and decrease in our tribal membership. We're also going to see, you know, the opportunity for when new housing is able to come on board. So again, you want to make sure that as if updating plans is a part of that NOFO, is a part of that RFA, and that's one of the goals that you want to implement as far as your project proposal, then identifying what type of data would be necessary for you not only to update the plan, but to provide those specifics within that project proposal. Because again, the federal funder is going to want to know, well, okay, well, they have a plan, and maybe your plan's not due for, it's a 5-year plan and you're on year 3, but you've already seen an increase in homes being built, or you've seen a change in your tribal membership, where you now have to really kind of go back to this plan because you're going to be implementing more opportunities for the development of septic tanks, or even if it's, you know, having them come on to the larger system like a wastewater treatment facility, then again, that information is going to be very vital to your project proposal to show your federal funder that this is why we need to update our plan now. This is why we need to ensure that we are, so to speak, in some way just doing a full analysis or feasibility study on why we need to increase, you know, the number of homes we have, as well as the number of lines that are available, or the homes that will go on or into the system itself. So again, just having that information is very important. And a lot of this is just going to be based off of, again, that NOFO or that RFA. So again, another within the RFA we looked at for the Swiffer grant, you know, purchasing, collection, or storage bins. You know, you need to identify, well, okay, well, what is the volume of your recycling program? Is your volume going to exceed, say, a recycling trailer like this that you see here in the photo? Are you going to need another type of recycling trailer that's going to be able to, say, collect cardboard only? Are you going to need another recycling trailer or storage bins that's specifically for aluminum, tin, and steel cans? You know, again, really looking at what it is you're developing in your project, what your department's developing, how you're building that capacity is very crucial and key to collecting the right data that's going to help strengthen your proposal. Again, this is just here, like I mentioned, doing a waste stream characterization, and like I mentioned, they are not fun in any type of way, especially if it's a hot day, you know, you're digging through garbage. But it's very important to ensure that as you're going through the process of a waste stream characterization, that you're pulling out that data that is going to help build your case for your project proposal, because EPA is going to want to see why this need is important for your community, why purchasing maybe additional recycling bins is going to help build your program, how it's going to help it increase because of the fact that you're starting to see more of these recyclable materials come in. So again, it's very important to really understand that you as the staff person are actually collecting data as you implement these various project proposals that you are applying for. So however it might be within your community, within your small systems, to ensure that the information that's being generated within is also used as you continue to develop project proposals in the future. So again, just an example, what type of data is needed to uh, update an ISWMP. Maybe it's the number of tribal members, the number of households, maybe the number of routes. So if you have a curbside collection program for your community, and again, this is just an example, and I do understand, most of you are with small systems, but just as an example, maybe because you've developed a new housing community has come on board, is being built. So now you need to increase maybe one or two more additional routes for your curbside collection program. So that's going to be important because that's also going to provide the data of how much waste is generated by this new subdivision and as a whole, the tribe itself or the tribal community itself. So again, days of the week for household pickup and the number of customers, number of customers, I know there's number of tribal members, but I put number of customers in there because my experience for working in Santo Domingo, not every single household within the pueblo was a customer of the utility department for but mainly for curbside collection. Of course, many of the homes were on either septic tanks or were hooked up to the lagoon. And so again, it's important to understand that just because you have a large number of tribal members or a certain number of households doesn't necessarily mean all of them are going to be customers of yours. So that's really important to understand as well. And again, if you're updating any type of plan, you'll want to provide information on why it needs updating, and the info above and what you collect internally from your tribe will also go a long way in providing the information to strengthen that proposal. Gathering community information, and one way we've always looked at collecting information is when we would host outreach events. Maybe you do a survey of your community. Maybe there's a time where it's during an environmental fair or Earth Day or something like that, and as part of getting that information to your community, you have swag that you are able to provide and give to them. Because I know for many communities I worked for, they always liked, whether it was a shirt that had, Santo Domingo Tribal Utility Department on it, or Santo Domingo's Department of Natural Resources, or whatever the image might be. So again, collecting that information for your community is also vital, and it's also data that you are generating and that you are building the capacity for to put it into your project proposal. So that's definitely something to not overlook. That's something to really to think about, as you move forward into the future and as you continue to apply for federal funds, that you are really doing what you need to as far as your due diligence in informing your community, especially when it comes to changes. Now I know when Santo Domingo built their transfer station, and we did a digital story on, solid waste just from a tribal community perspective. And it's really impactful when you go from free to fee, and now you're anticipating or expecting your tribal members who will utilize the transfer station to pay a small fee in order to get rid of their household refuse, or maybe it's a large couch or something that will not fit into that 55 or that 90-gallon tote. So again, it's really important to ensure that, as you're making changes, even the smallest changes, from my experience within a tribal community, can really be impactful. So again, you're really going to want to take the time to not just only collect that data from your community, but to utilize it to strengthen your proposal and to really build that necessary information and data that's going to help you in the long run. So here, just looking at it as an example, where can I find data that's outside of my tribe, that's outside of the Natural Resources Department or the Tribal Utility Department? So just keeping in mind that data may come from other sources. Maybe it's the state office, that you're able to tap into to identify any type of specifics that you might need. But also keep in mind that maybe it's a state program or a state grant that you're applying for. And state grants may and probably will vary from those federal funds. So again, reading through the NOFO, reading through the RFA, definitely important, so that way you understand what you need to put into your project proposal. But again, what type of data is necessary for you to build that capacity. So again, then looking at it again, since we're like I mentioned as an example, talking about, solid waste and recycling, you might, again, talking about showing you photos from the waste stream characterization, they are interchangeable. But again, it just helps you to develop that information that's needed for you and your project proposal. So that way it really goes a long way. And a lot of this is really helpful, especially when you develop your scope of work. I know when I've developed scope of works or my work plan, oftentimes, from EPA and my experience with EPA, they want to know what your specific deliverables are. And deliverables can go a long way too, because that's also data and information that you're generating that is showcasing or highlighting the efforts you are undertaking for this specific proposal or for this specific grant funding opportunity, and how it's really helping your community in positive ways, where the impact is starting to see maybe less and less illegal dump sites out there. Maybe it's seeing more people participating in the recycling program, and maybe it's seeing at the landfill and the cost of those tipping fees are going down, because now you've reduced a lot of tonnage because you're pulling out of your waste stream recyclable material or even composting material like food waste and stuff, because food waste is definitely heavy and there is a lot of it. So again, identifying ways to collect data and information, is something you will start to experience or you will start to identify for your community, your reservation, or your tribe. So again, why is a waste audit needed for your tribe? Why is it important to your proposal? So again, providing the data on the need to better understand the waste stream from the tribal department, the community members. Maybe you have tribally owned businesses, and because you have tribally owned businesses, you're starting to see a lot more waste generated. Or if you have a casino and you're trying to figure out, well, what can I do to really have a benefit by utilizing a recycling program in my business, to start to see the amount of waste that is generated from the casino go down, and maybe not pay so much of those tipping fees for your tribally owned business. So again, here's just some other information of data that will support, if you have a transfer station or you have maybe your landfill and you're wanting to increase fees, and nobody likes fees to be increased, because let me tell you, we talked about that at Santo Domingo to increase fees. I mean, and it really wasn't large fees to begin with, but again, when you're talking about increasing fees for your transfer station and you have a poverty rate of like maybe 30% or something like that, where that majority of your tribal members are non-working or there's not enough jobs to support everybody, increase of fees will definitely be impactful in many ways, because again, you might also see an increase in illegal dump sites that are out there on the land. And even though you're trying to reduce those illegal dump sites so that way there's no more, then again, really being conscious about how the data will support the needs to increase these fees, but also how it will work with your project proposal. So again, just recycling, if you're looking at building your capacity for recycling, perhaps purchasing more recycling bins, perhaps starting a curbside recycling program is the way to go. And you're starting to see the benefits of that, or you're starting to see the positive impact of that. So then again, you want to make sure that this data matches the project proposal, because again, you're only wanting to ensure that as you develop your proposal, your scope of work, your budget and budget narrative, that it's meeting the needs of your community, but it's also generating the information that's necessary to show your federal funder why it's important for you to purchase maybe 20 more 90-gallon recycling totes for your community and your curbside collection program. Remember that you need to justify your project with data. So again, going back to the beginning of the webinar or the slides in the beginning, and knowing that data is definitely very important, but it can't just be, randomly selected, especially if it doesn't follow that NOFO or that RFA and what the guidance of that specific data might be for your project proposal or for that specific funding. So making sure that you justify it, making sure that you have the correct number of households, making sure you have identified how many tribal members your community has or your small systems is serving in regards to those households. So again, going back and really looking at what information is being collected within, or what information you might need to have that is coming from an outside source to justify your project and why you are applying for X amount of dollars or whatever it is you might be seeking through this specific type of RFA or NOFO. So again, just to really give you a quick look at the evaluation criteria, because I really feel that evaluation criteria is important. And I am checking the time. I do see that we have about 11 minutes, and I do believe we are getting close to the end of my presentation. But again, making sure you look at the evaluation criteria within that NOFO or within that RFA, because that's really going to help you understand, you know, the number of points each of these criteria and description have, and how or what you need to know to ensure that you are making it clear and concise, but also that the data that you are providing in your project narrative, or, you know, as you develop your budget, that it has that correct information of why you need, you know, $20,000 to purchase, again, those additional 90-gallon totes, and how it's going to be impactful to the community. So again, the evaluation criteria, I feel, is always important. And I've not only been on the side of writing grants and proposals, but in my current position, I now sit at that opposite spectrum where I am actually a grant reviewer. So, you know, for me as a grant reviewer and reading a grant, a proposal that comes in from a tribe or from, you know, a consortium partner, whoever it may be, it's really important that I understand what these evaluation criteria means and what the description are. So as I'm weighing that project proposal, I am doing my due diligence in the best of my ability to understand what this proposal is intending to do, and how the information that is provided within the project summary, within the narrative, within the budget, all meets the criteria, but also has the necessary information for it to be awarded or to rank high enough to get awarded. So again, here's just a couple additional, just the criteria and description for evaluation. And again, just providing another example of different type of funding opportunities. And here in New Mexico, aside from US EPA and doing a general assistance program grant for your solid waste program, we also have the New Mexico Recycling and Illegal Dumping Grant. And this grant really helps in a long way, especially if you're going to do abatement of illegal dump sites. And I've held the tribal government seat for the RAID Alliance for 6 years. So again, being that one to review these project proposals as they're coming in, making sure that they have the required data in regards to not just only the number of dump sites they're wanting to abate, but what is inside these dump sites. What is the proximity to a school? What is the proximity to homes? What is the proximity to a river, whether it's flowing or it's ephemeral? You know, what are the specifics that are needed as far as those details and the data that's going to improve or make their proposal stronger, because they knew the type of data that was necessary to input into it. Again, just to give you an example of another criteria that is weighed, you know, so this is types of things that we look at. So again, this type of information is important because this is the data that you're going to need for depending on what federal funding opportunity you're going to apply for, whatever RFA you're going to apply for. So again, this gives you the information of, you know, specific data that is going to be required. Again, other places for data to support your project proposal, EJ Screen. EJ Screen is really a good tool and resource. If you ever get a chance, go ahead and check it out. But it's really going to help, again, depending on what your project is about, where you're located. EJ Screen will zoom in on different types of like if you're near a oil refinery and things like that, and how is that going to impact you, especially if you're applying for environmental justice grants, because that information is imperative to strengthen your proposal. Here's just a map that shows cleanups, you know, throughout the United States for different things, and most of these are more for, I believe, hazardous waste and stuff like that. But again, as you can see, depending on where your location is and if you're looking for specific data, this is something that could help you to generate that information that you might need to put into your project proposal. Again, Climate Mapper, if you're looking at climate change and you're developing climate adaptation plans, or you're really wanting to understand what the vulnerabilities of your community are in regards to whether it's cultural or natural resources, public health, just different things. And if you're really looking at what those projections mean and how it's going to impact your community as you're developing your climate adaptation plan, this is a resource that will also help generate data that you could use in your project proposals. Again, I cannot stress this enough. You need to justify your project with data. You can't just say, oh, we're going to go in and clean up X amount of dump sites and hoping that after that our community will know now that it's important to utilize the transfer station and not to dump illegally out there on the land. So again, just making sure that whatever data you're looking for specific to the needs, not just of the tribe, of your small systems, but the needs of that specific RFA or NOFO. And again, that's why I showed the different parts of a NOFO and RFA, because it's really going to show you where this information is. And I know if you attended the first webinar that we had, session 1, where I showed the table of contents. To me, the table of contents is vital because you could just look back at, what it is you might specifically need to know within that RFA or NOFO, and then boom, go straight to that page where it's at. So with that, Owen, we just about done. Right, finished at 6 minutes before, 5 minutes before the end of the hour. So again, just really taking time to understand your NOFO, making sure you have the correct data to justify your project proposal, and really just reviewing and reading through those NOFOs and RFAs is really going to help you as you get ready to not only develop your project proposal, but as you get ready for it to be submitted. And with that, questions, and Noah or Owen, I will turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Well, currently we don't have any questions in the chat. I'm not sure if anybody have any that they want to send in. Give a few minutes for that.
And I will provide my email right now, Owen. I'm not sure if it's going to go to everybody or just to you. And if you
It went just to me, but I can, yeah, I'll copy and send it.
Okay, and then I will also share my other email with the American Indian Higher Education Consortium, just in case anybody within my Southwest CASC region, which would be California, Nevada, Arizona, and Utah, if you have any questions in regards to climate adaptation, especially climate adaptation for small systems, because small systems are very vulnerable to climate change, definitely can reach out to me at that email address, and as well as the other one if you should have any questions aside from today.
Awesome. Well, I sent those in the chat. I'll just give it another minute. Anybody have any questions? Okay, so it's not looking like it, so we can wrap up. A huge thank you to Cynthia for sharing their expertise with us today. Following this webinar, you will receive follow-up email with the slides from today and a link to the recording. We also ask that you complete the webinar evaluation following the webinar so that you can let us know your thoughts on today's session, as this helps us plan future webinars on topics that are important to you. Thank you again, and we hope to see you at future EFCN events.
All right, thanks, Owen. I appreciate it. Have a good day, everybody.